It's time for MacBreak Weekly. We've got all the Mac news, and we've got Jason Snell, we've got Andy Ihnatko, we've got Rene, Ritchie, a great panel to talk about the latest from Apple. It's next on MacBreak Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 438, recorded Tuesday, January 20th, 2015. Give them the shoes. MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by FreshBooks, the simple cloud accounting solution that helps millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Join over 5 million users running their business with ease. Try it free at freshbooks.com/MacBreak. And by Squarespace. Creating and editing your website is easier than ever using their redesigned interface, Squarespace 7. Now with Getty Images, Google Apps integration, 14 new templates, and more. Try the new Squarespace at squarespace.com, and don't forget to enter the offer code MacBreak at checkout to get 10% off. And by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting snacks right to your door. Start snacking smarter with wholesome, delicious treats like roasted Peruvian corn kernels. Woo-hoo. To get your complimentary NatureBox sampler, visit naturebox.com/twit. That's naturebox.com/twit. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show that covers your latest Macintosh news. Andy Ihnatko from the Chicago Sun-Times is here. Looking beautiful, crisp, clear. He's using the Vermeer filter from Instagram today, and I think just dynamite. All you need is a pearl earring, and you're set.
And an engineer had mastered the technique for this by staring into a concave mirror.
It's amazing.
I've been told not to move because it really screws up his vibe.
One of these days we should do an oil painting version of you guys. Rene, Ritchie. Oh, nice.
Do you like that? This is
warmed
my
it up.
on the fly.
Looks like he's on the
Actually,
I could actually make it very Instagram
You need
here.
4 of me, and then you need to like sort of put them in the
that's very
corners.
Warhol. Yeah, it's a Warhol filter. Also with us, Rene Ritchie from the very cold, powerless Canada.
I have 3 UPSs set up, Leo, just in case.
So you have power now.
Yes, but like I said, I got 3 of them set up just in case anyone tries to interfere with the podcast. Is it Vermeer or Vermier? I never know what to change foreign names.
Freaking Frenchies. I don't know.
Pantsed or not?
Or is it Vermeer? Like, is it a Dutch Vermeer or something?
Well, who knows what the Dutch is? I think Van Gogh is Van Gogh. So who knows what the Dutch is? Maybe Jason Snell does. He's also here. Hi,
Hello.
Jason.
I'm here.
Van
Present.
Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Klingon.
Van Gogh.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rene. You said something?
I got yelled at because I said Gouda, and someone looked at me and said, "It's Gouda. It's Gouda."
It's not Gouda.
Oh, boy.
It's Gouda. Like Gouda baby.
Anyway. Jason, it's Klingon.
I was once giving like a talk in front of like on a panel in front of like 500 people, and in the middle of this really complex thing that I was trying to explain, misattributed a quote about, "Hey, here's why do you rob banks? That's because where the money is." And someone else on the panel like decided to interrupt me and correct
I'm sorry,
the quote.
Andy.
And
Actually,
I had to just like, do I yell at this person and call him an idiot, or do I just continue with me talking? Because oh God, I still relive that moment at least like once every 5 months. Like, you pointed that out.
It was like Pretty Boy Floyd or something. Who said it?
I said it was Dillinger, but it's not Dillinger.
It's not
I think
Dillinger.
it's someone else.
I'm sorry, Andy. I believe you're hanging.
Because I could see the looks on everybody's faces in that audience, because everyone's saying, "My God, did he just misattribute that vague piece of trivia?" Thank God you stepped in, sir. And yes, no, it's like on the list of things to do when I get a time machine. It's not in the top 100, but it's on the list to go back and just say, "God, you're such an idiot."
Molly Wood calls it the literal net, and I think it's very apt.
A tomato is not a vegetable, you know.
It is a fruit.
It is technically part of
Willie
the fruit
Sutton.
family.
Fritz says Willie Sutton, which I think is correct.
We were talking the other day that if you put anything up on Twitter, you will get maybe 1 reply to it, but you'll get 300 people telling you about every typo or misattribution.
Have you seen that tweet? There's a great tweet that said, you get more responses from saying something wrong than from asking for help. It's called Godwin's Law. It works.
That's good.
It's brilliant.
And just we'll gloss that. The Godwin's Law.
Everybody,
is not,
please correct
that
us.
is not Godwin's Law. We know
that's
that.
the thing. And yeah. Zing.
Wow. Wow. I don't know. This is going to be kind of a slow week, I think. I don't know really if there's any. I mean, Apple opening 5 new Chinese retail stores.
I was stretching.
Doesn't really like kind of galvanize.
I was like, it's either 5 total links in the doc, or I just put.
How about Apple cuts off developers in Crimea? Is that no?
They abandon them. Did they leave them to float?
Show's over, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. This is going to be. We're going to talk about comic books. We're going to talk about audio.
What kind of sandwich did you have today? Which kind of sandwich did you wish you had? Now I went to the really good bakery because I'm having a really good pasta dinner tonight, and they didn't have the crusty kinds of bread. They have the soft kinds of bread. I mean, it has a good crumb to it.
Hey,
but I
actually,
just like that crunch of a good Italian.
I have a related story. Chipotle is very interested in Apple Pay.
I thought you might like that.
There you go.
Thought you might like that.
Not using it. We're interested.
You're making me hungry, Leo. You're making me hungry.
We're thinking about it. It's gotten to the point now where we're doing stories where people are thinking about things they might do, like that Apple Touch patent.
I have an Apple Pay related thing, which is watching the football games this weekend. I was amazed at the marketing money that's going into different banks, all doing their own ads saying, yay, we have Apple Pay. And, it's kind of brilliant because I don't know whether Apple is kicking in or whether it's just the banks spending their own money, but there was a Bank of America ad, there was a Chase ad.
Oh, do you think that's Apple co-op marketing?
My guess is no. My guess is that the banks all want to be seen with Apple. But isn't that amazing that there are at least 3 unique spots from different banks?
By the way, including the NFL, who's saying, "Oh, we take Apple Pay at our stadiums," and
just falling over themselves to say it. And I know that every time one of those ads runs, somebody who has an Android phone that has been doing NFC payments all along is like, "Why are they doing it?" But the banks are very excited to be working with Apple on Apple Pay. I mean, they're spending money marketing it. It's pretty crazy.
Thank you, Jason, for trying to bring some relevance to this show.
Just trying.
Let's have a poll across the panel. Talk about the last time you used Apple Pay, and if either level 2, where the clerk registered surprised that you were using it, or level 1, in which you had to explain to the clerk how Apple Pay works. Last time I used it, I was at a at a Panera, and I did have to say, "Oh, well, it's a phone payment system." And the reason why, all you have to just press the button on your register and it'll accept.
Wow, that's interesting. Even though they had it. They had never been trained in it,
I think it's more of a case of just people not really using it. It's like I use it all the time at certain different stores, and chances are at least 2 out of 3 that I will be introducing the concept of these payments to somebody during the transaction.
That might give lie to the idea that lots of people are using Apple Pay.
I don't know. My Whole Foods, they don't even blink anymore.
No, I've used it at Whole Foods.
Although the flow there is pretty direct. I mean, if I don't slide my card and tap, it's a payment is registered, and for them they just move on to the next step. But I do that all the time.
I'm still eagerly awaiting the arrival of Apple Pay in my great country to the north here. Hopefully this spring. Fingers crossed for this spring.
Everything comes late to Canada. It's just how it is. Sorry,
even
Canada.
The thaw.
Someday. Okay. Here's a story about Apple Pay. Apple patents. I don't do patents normally because, Apple patents everything. They have an idea. They fart. They patent it. And so a patent does not, contrary to what every tech blog who's equally suffering for lack of news might indicate, an Apple patent does not indicate any future plans. It is not a forward-looking statement. It's just like, well, we ought to patent this. However, I'm desperate. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office on Thursday published an Apple patent application. By the way, they got it.
No.
For an iCloud-based Touch ID syncing fingerprint-protected Apple Pay terminal.
Oh, I thought you were going to do the stylus patent, Leo.
I will do that. That's coming up. It's going to be all patents.
So
today.
watch.
That's coming up. The GoPro one. I got it all. I got them. We're doing it all. Because we're basically
this week in Apple patents.
Yeah, we're stuck.
we got some great stuff. Come on.
We'll have a dramatic
Just not
reading of
patents.
warranty card information from all our different iOS devices.
Actually, Jason and I did something we may resort to later on, which was a dramatic reading of the chat room.
Oh yeah. Oh man,
That was fun.
That's gold.
That was comedy gold,
That's
my
gold.
friends.
Read the
Radio
chat
theater.
room as a teleprompter.
Yeah.
There's going to be a show in that somewhere.
It was good.
sometime.
Apple ranks only 11th in patents according to the chat room. IBM number 1, Samsung number 2. But Apple's trying to catch up. Remember, IBM's have been at this a little bit longer, so you'd expect them to be number 1. Samsung, who knows? I don't know why they have so many patents.
Because they're a conglomerate. They're probably
And scared of
patenting oil
Apple.
rigs and
Yeah.
toilet seats and all
Right.
sorts of things.
And scared of Apple. So this could do away with the manual Touch ID setup and power the next generation of Apple Pay-enabled POS terminals. Or not. It might not. It might not be anything. Finger biometric sensor data synchronization via cloud computing device and related methods. So that collects your fingerprint on a primary device and then is uploaded to iCloud. I think this is the whole thing that everybody was worried about with fingerprint Touch ID was it's going to be uploaded to iCloud. Nobody wants this. So Apple's patenting it. But I think people would be very nervous about the idea that your fingerprint might be stored on the cloud as opposed to just on the device. In fact, the iPhone doesn't even store your fingerprint. It stores metadata.
There's some data in that secure enclave.
Yeah.
In the chip.
I mean, this is we're all supposed to every time you use an ATM that we don't absolutely even the bank ATMs, you're supposed to just give that card skimmer a little bit of a tug to make sure that it looks like it's actually built into the machine.
Really?
Oh yeah, no, you haven't heard of these things where people will sort of break in and just stick fake ones on top of it.
Yep.
And so they're just basically you're just handing over your credit card information, and just of course the ATM doesn't work. They have their card information, and if I'm not sure,
a skimmer.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure if I'd be really comfortable with using my fingerprint to register at an actual point of sale terminal, as opposed to this is my phone. I own this phone. I know the technology behind the fingerprint scanner here, and I know that whatever data constitutes equating this with my identity is not going to leave this device. I'm not sure if I would do that at any other store.
Have any of you encountered? I've started to hear about this lately. Using Apple Pay and then being asked to sign.
Yeah, it's their option. Yeah. They can choose whether they want you to sign or not.
Yeah.
They have all sorts of
some of the excitement out of it.
I think it's going to change over time. My understanding is it's a store policy thing, and it's usually a large price. Some of that comes with the idea that if you just tap an NFC card, you could have stolen the card.
Right.
And so they want a second factor. They want a second bit of identification. Now, with Apple Pay, there's Touch ID, so there is a second factor. So theoretically, down the road, they could say, oh, well, if you're paying with Apple Pay, we don't want to sign. But a lot of times the scripts are in place in the payment systems that just say, look, it's over $100 or over $50. We want you to sign anyway. But it's dumb. It shouldn't be necessary.
Our NFC is on a card, not on our phones, and there's no secondary authentication. So most retailers here have an arbitrary amount that they'll no longer allow the tap for. Like some it's $30, some's $50, some's $90. The interface doesn't change, so you're still asked to tap it, and then you hit it several times, frustrated, before the clerk says, "Oh no, sorry, after $50, you've got to use the PIN and chip." But everyone has those kind of safeguards.
In Canada, they say sorry.
And here in the States, in October, we're going to be chip and sign.
Yeah, optionally or chip and pin. You can do either one, but the pin isn't mandatory.
Only that you do sign.
Yeah. So it's we're halfway there. I have that now at my Whole Foods. I can spend up to I think it's $30 or $40 and with a credit card, and they won't ask me to sign. Below that point, they're like, they don't care.
I would like to see this everywhere. I'm just thinking about signing. I often get large dollar figure shipments from UPS and others, and they say Apple says this, somebody's gonna have to sign before we'll leave this MacBook. It'd be great if people like UPS started using Apple Pay. You could just tap. It'd be real. Oh, but wait a minute. There's a problem there.
Like it.
Because it wouldn't be you. It could be anybody, right? But at least they know who accepted the shipment.
I think the biggest problem is that UPS is at the level of efficiency where they know exactly how many seconds it takes to get from the truck to the front door, and how quick they can get that. And so if they know that people, if they ask them to sign something, it's one question, one answer. It will definitely work. If it's tap and pay, and that loses them 8 seconds per transaction, that's a deal breaker for UPS.
That's a good point. Although I would think it'd be faster. I think it'd be the opposite, wouldn't it?
Also, how many people walk to the door with their phones to sign for a package?
So how many people put on their pants before they walk to the door? That's my question.
Well, if the UPS guy isn't wearing pants either,
he's wearing shorts.
Meet us halfway.
I can wear my boxers. It's okay. I just wave at him through the bars when they.
I just wear my cousin Eddie's shorty bathrobe.
Somebody was saying at Walgreens they require his Apple Pay Plus PIN, so that must be another option.
Yeah, I think there's this validation step.
I think second factor is fine.
Yeah,
I think
Apple
we'll
Pay
get there. Is because it's a fingerprint plus the phone.
Yeah, that's the idea. So you'd like at some point it to just be like, if it's Apple Pay, we know that the second factor was applied.
Now you're doing three factor if you're doing a PIN or a signature.
Because to me, the big win isn't just the convenience of, hey, all I got to do is tap my thumb and it goes through. The real factor for me is that this store never sees my bank or my credit card information. They just get a little magic bean that says, give them the shoes. And that's even if it was a signature and a PIN every single time, I would probably still do that just for that alone.
Yeah. The other thing is signing doesn't seem to be very significant in terms of identification because, well, I learned this from Lisa because I was always signing my name. And she says, oh, you don't have to sign your name. Just go boopity-loop.
Yeah.
She does that. It works. You could write Mickey Mouse. You could put an X. They're not matching it to anything. They're just saying, oh, you signed.
Yeah.
So it's not really ID. It's a custom.
And they can look at it later. If you dispute it, they can check your signature.
Well, whose X's is? I don't know.
Yeah.
So long as it's not the mark you make, but so long as it's a consistent mark. Like my signature is just muscle memory at this point.
Doesn't seem to have to even be consistent.
Not for credit cards because they're not matching
random.
it. I think that's true for things like signing a check maybe
legal
or
document or a check. I understand, but I'm saying at the point of sale terminal,
nobody checks.
You can make any shape you want, and nobody checks it, and the charge goes through. I draw little fishies.
What I'm saying is that if you dispute a $580 Xbox One purchase on your credit card, and they show you a signature that looks absolutely nothing like the 10 signatures before it or after it, they're definitely not going to give you a problem about it. But if your signature is a happy face and two dots and a smile, you're going to have a hard time proving that. Yeah, I know that this time was a flower and the next time was a happy face. The time before that was a shoe. But trust me, I would definitely not have done a wristwatch as a signature thingy.
That reminds me of the things the bank do. The picture that you're supposed to. I never really understood how that is in any way more secure. So I have like a picture of a high boy, some piece of furniture.
Oh yeah. Don't give it away. That's your secret code.
It's not. It's meaningless. It's a piece of furniture. And then they say, now attach a phrase to this. And if you don't see the high boy and your phrase, and usually my phrase has been stupid effing picture code.
It's the other way around. It's not there to verify you. It's there to verify the actual bank.
Yeah. If I don't see the high boy,
and also, I mean, you log into these things like probably once a day or once every other day just to make sure you're on top of your balances and your activity. And that's the most direct and absolute way to not to get you from yellow alert to red alert. That this doesn't look the same way it does every single day. So
no, I understand that, but I just think that it's an anti-phishing measure. I understand that, but it's a flaw in anti-phishing measure because, first of all, if somebody's phishing you, they could capture that image and put it there, or most likely just not put it there. Are you going to stop because, oh, thank gosh, they don't do the site key. I could skip that today. You're not going to go, oh, wait a minute, this couldn't be my bank.
Remember.
Where's my high boy?
You could also, but to that effect, you could also just like, to make sure you always have money for the tolls and money for lunch, you could just like have a milk crate outside your door and just keep it filled with money.
I do.
Just grab a handful
it's
every
in my
time
mattress.
you go out.
Yeah.
With the understanding that perhaps other people will be taking your money away from you.
It's an honor system.
Most people, yeah, exactly. We've lost all the records from the bank when we move, but this sounds like a big problem, but really it isn't. So long as everybody just come right in and tell us how much you have with us.
This is the dirty little secret of the banking system. It's an honor system.
Well, it really is. I mean, the big failure of security is that they've sort of trained every consumer to not really care that much about the security of their own credit card information, because every time you have a dispute, it's like, okay, great, we'll take that off your card. Fraud. It's so much less expensive to simply write off $531 against your card than to put in all the infrastructure to make it really, really difficult for anybody to do a fraudulent transaction. And that's why we're in the situation we're in right now.
I agree. As long as
they make the money back with fee. I remember I was getting royalty payments from Hong Kong, and it cost almost 80% of the royalty payment to get it accepted at my bank. And I said, don't you just process all this in the same branch in New York anyway? And they said, sure, but we get to charge you a big fee for doing it here. So, I mean, they get offset.
Crazy. You may remember the antitrust lawsuit that went on for a long time against Apple, Google, and a lot of other large Silicon Valley companies. They had made agreements, which is illegal, with each other not to poach each other's employees. It's actually protected with antitrust law, and they lost in court. They have now settled. Apple and Google settled for $415 million. That money doesn't go to Apple or Google. It goes to the tech workers who accused the firms of conspiring to avoid poaching each other's employees. And the smoking gun was still pretty hot. The barrel, the barrel was hot to the touch, and they deserve to lose this case. And I presume they've stopped doing that. Yeah. $415 million though for Google and Apple. It's like, big deal.
But that's really bad news for these employees, because from now on, you know that if you're not getting headhunted by the competition, it's because you
suck. You just suck. No one wants you. All right, we're talking about Apple news. It's kind of crumbs, but it's not going to be a crummy show. There's if you have Jason Snell, if you have Rene Ritchie, if you have Andy Ihnatko, we could talk about anything, and it would be entertaining.
And we may.
And I think that's what's coming up next on the program. Just
show about nothing.
Show about nothing. Our show today brought to you by FreshBooks. This was, I'm thinking probably the first Web 2.0 site I ever used back in 2004. I was a suffering freelancer, never got it together to send out my invoices at the end of the month, and subsequently never got paid. And when I found out about FreshBooks, it was actually Amber MacArthur who told me about it. I was going up to Canada once a month, and I had to bill them, not only for my my time and hours, but also for my expenses. They had to pay me. And FreshBooks just solved this. I mean, it really took the paperwork out of it. It's accounting made for you, the non-accountant. 5 million people now use FreshBooks since I discovered it 10 years ago. It is fantastic. If you're still using Word or Excel or, I don't know, Google Docs, people use Google Docs to create an invoice and then share it with your client. Let's not do that. FreshBooks is the best way to create professional-looking invoices in minutes. They have a big pay button on each invoice, by the way, which makes it very easy for your clients to pay you. And it turns out your clients do want to pay you. They're just like you. They're putting it off. Make it easy for them. On average, FreshBooks users get paid 5 days faster. That's fantastic. And apparently, I don't know how this correlates. On average, FreshBooks customers double their revenue in the first 2 years. I think it's just because they're smart people. If you're using FreshBooks, you're paying attention. FreshBooks integrates with your apps like Google Apps, PayPal, Stripe, MailChimp, Fundbox, Zen Payroll. It accepts all the top credit cards and other online payment systems. Your client's happy. It's also built for growing businesses, obviously. And that's because it scales. You can add clients and projects and staff very easily. You'll spend less time on paperwork. You'll get paid faster. And you can actually use the FreshBooks app to put time and hours. They have an iPhone and an Android app that put time and hours right into the invoices to take pictures of receipts so you get paid back. I just think this is such a great solution. And boy, your accountant will love it come tax time. Instant access to complete financial reports so you can make smart decisions for your business, and your accountant can do his job or her job. And of course, they have great award-winning support 24/7, free forever. Try FreshBooks free with no obligation. Start your free. There they are. That's the support team. Don't they look nice and Canadian? You can kind of tell that's a Toronto warehouse, can't you?
We're sorry, they look nice.
FreshBooks story. If you ever want to know, go to the webpage and read about it. It's a really great story. Try FreshBooks free, no obligation. We've got a 30-day free trial for you. Just go to freshbooks.com/MacBreak. And I think that they ask you in the sign-up, where'd you hear about us? If you would put MacBreak Weekly in there, everybody would be very happy, including me. freshbooks.com/MacBreak. You don't need to give them a credit card to try it for your 30 days. Just sign up, and it's really great. I really love it. Now, I gave you guys some time to think.
I got one.
Yeah,
in the
thank
show
you,
notes.
Jason Snell.
In the show notes, under development, 2 interesting things related to making money on the App Store.
I love this Monument Valley infographic. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that, and Marco Arment disclosed his 2014 Overcast sales numbers, which is interesting too. So it's people saying, look, this is how much money I made on the App Store.
You know I'm a fan of transparency. We're very transparent about our business. And what that's nice about that is if you're interested, you're thinking, do I want to be an app developer. What is it going to cost? What is the return likely? Now, we have to point out Monument Valley was the game of 2014, and we all played it. We all loved it. But for them to say, here's the numbers, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. It's a small team. There's 8 folks in London that do this. They show the sales by country. They show the development costs, which that's one of the things that's kind of unheard of. It cost for the original Monument Valley, which doesn't have that many levels, but it took them 55 weeks, I'm sorry. $852,000. That's how much it cost. Then they did, remember, the Forgotten Shores pack, which was more puzzles. That took them another 29 weeks and cost another $549,000. So the total costs here about $1.4 million, but the revenue, $5.8 million. So that shows you it's not a great business, but it's a good business.
It's pretty good.
It's okay. I mean, there's a lot of overhead.
81% iOS.
Now that's interesting. Now this is the paid story here. iOS, they sold the total sales were 2.4 million. They sold 1.7 million, more than half of that to iOS. Only about 300,000 to Android.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
They had a big day when Amazon gave it away for free. I guess I don't know if that was more than a day.
A big day. They had a lot of downloads, and not a lot of revenue.
Not a lot of revenue. 407,000 downloads, though. More than the total Android downloads by a significant number. Now, they say it's installed. They sold 2.4 million, but it's installed on 10 million devices. Now, that's not necessarily piracy because, and I'm an example of this. I bought it on my iPad, but I put it on my iPhone, that kind of thing. So that doesn't mean, but they do say there's a lot of piracy. They think there was a significant amount of unauthorized download.
I mean, at this point, there's 2 big problems about targeting Android and why so many developers don't mess with it until after they've made their nut off of iOS, because you're not going to get the same sort of numbers, because really you can only really target people who are running Android 4.0 and probably only 4.2 or 3. Yeah. And that's just a really small wedge of the pie right now because of carriers not updating their phones frequently enough. And another bullet point from that piece was how much piracy there is on Android. Strictly not necessarily because it's not a safe platform, but you can just go into settings, flip a switch, and say, yes, I will run any software from any source whatsoever, even this here file that I'm providing to you. Whereas almost nobody these days is going to jailbreak a phone unless they're doing it with intent, so to speak.
50% of the players who started the game. How many of you here finished Monument Valley?
I finished the original. I'm still slowly working through the Forgotten Shores because I don't want it to end.
I know,
right?
In fact, if there's the only complaint about Monument Valley anybody has is that it's too short.
Sure, it's not particularly replayable.
Right.
It's not particularly hard to solve the puzzles.
But compared to like a movie price or something, I'm fine with the amount of time.
Yeah. How much is it? $3.99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is like listening to a song.
Yeah,
it's
where
fine.
You're meant to listen to it and get to the end of it, and then enjoy this piece of art that you're experiencing.
And it's, by the way, the music it is kind of like listening to a song because the music's beautiful. It's very soothing. You put on your headphones, and there's no timer. You could take your time,
and it looks great. The graphics are fantastic.
Yeah,
50% finished it. I'm one of the people who did not, but all the rest of the panel did. So. 75% of the Twit panel. Oh, you did not? So it's 50%.
It's kind of like what Jason said. I was just enjoying the colors and the sounds and just twirling things around more than, okay, I got to finish this level. I got to finish this level.
Exactly.
And so I'm not, it's so weird in that, yes, there are specific goals, but I've never once been the slightest bit frustrated in trying to get the game to work or, oh man, I died again. It's like, no, you're just enjoying. It's like a Rubik's Cube can be a very meditative thing just to hold in your hands and tumble, even if you have never actually solved it.
I think this is why some of the criticism of the game is kind of crazy, because people do say, oh, it's not a very hard puzzle and I solved it really fast. And all that. It's like, this is not that kind of game. This is I keep telling people I hate this because it sounds so cliche to say it's an experience, but it's an experience. It's fun to be playing the game, and that's sort of the point of it.
As I was saying, too few notes in this song.
I have to say, though, as good as the revenue was, it probably would have been significantly higher had it been a freemium product, right? That seems low compared to even something like Flappy Bird, which is advertising only.
I think that was always one of the debates about Monument Valley, is whether they should have done the free-to-play where they gave you a level or two and then you bought the rest of it. And they decided not to do that. And it's gone okay for them. I don't think they're kicking themselves, but you do wonder.
There's a thing, though, that there's different models for the freemium, and paying for levels, like paying for removing ads, has not been very successful. People they'll put up with ads and they'll play a couple levels and they'll go to the next free game. It's only when you get into things like in-game consumables that you make a lot of money. And I don't relish the idea of having to walk around there paying for like crow jumping points or gems or something.
That's what I was going to say. Like, what are you going to do for Monument Valley? For $10, you can buy a ladder that you can just bridge things with and climb over things with. I mean, part of it is, again, that meditative process where you just simply spend some time and flip things around. If at any point it gives you a decision point where do you want to buy something or do you want to keep playing the game, that would have disrupted just this wonderful like mental flow that you're in. I would not be. I've not talked to the developers, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was an aesthetic choice as much as anything else.
And now let's move to Marco. Overcast, which is Marco Arment. Marco Arment doesn't need the money. He was, I'm presuming.
I don't know about that.
I shouldn't say that.
He's very young.
He's got children.
Yeah.
But he was one of the original Tumblr folks, and I'm sure made a little money there. He also created Instapaper, which was a great success. He's since sold it. I get the feeling that Overcast, which is his podcast app, was a labor of love more than, but I don't know. You know him. I don't know.
I mean, I think he got some money obviously from the Tumblr sale, but he's a developer and he wants to. I think it gave him the freedom to explore what he wanted to do and work on an app that the audio engine took him probably a year to build, and he had the freedom to do that. But still, he wants to work on something sustainable, something that brings in enough money that he can support his family ideally on that. And what's interesting here is that this is a niche, right? Just podcasting apps alone, it's a niche.
Well,
Apple makes one for free,
right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is he did a free app with a single in-app purchase to unlock all of the kind of premium features. So it is a free-to-play kind of approach with the unlock. That's a shareware kind of thing. I think that's really cool. What's interesting about the numbers is we all knew there would be a big bump when it was first launched, but it looks like it settled down to a reasonable amount of new purchases every week, and that's kind of encouraging as a renewable resource for
He's
app
currently
development.
at $20,000 a month, which is a good profit. He says that's before taxes and costs, but he does call it profit.
And don't forget Apple's 30%, which I am amused by. That you hear about Apple's 30%, but then when you see like the specific number that Overcast made Apple $70,000 last year,
right?
It's like, wow, 30%. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah. He says total revenue was $164,000 for 2014, $164,000 after Apple, but before taxes and expenses. The only reason I mention he doesn't need the money is maybe it makes sense that it's a free app with a single in-app purchase of $5 to unlock everything. Probably, I would guess. Let's see.
He explored a lot of different models. He was initially thinking of doing some very different things with it, and decided that you had to be free in the App Store to be tried.
I think so. And I think this is the ethical way to do it. It's not expensive. It's free to try. The paid tier is not necessary. In fact, it looks like only 14.7% of his downloads paid, which might be a little disheartening. He says 200,000 people launched the app and created an account out of 318,000 downloads. So you could see you get a lot of downloads. You get fewer people, like considerably fewer, actually setting it up, and then far fewer actually buying it. Only 46,000, people bought it. Although not bad revenue, right? He only pays, this is interesting, $750 a month for his server.
Servers are so cheap, it's crazy.
That's really important if you want to be an indie app developer. Well, what are my ongoing costs? He says it's half my family's health insurance.
If you listen to his show, he talks about how he's learning Go now to try and optimize it further. So he can get
and Go is specifically a multi-threaded language from Google that it really is about server side, right? Yeah. He wouldn't write the app in Go, but he would write the server-side stuff in Go. Yeah.
I think one of the reasons his revenue is going okay now is because you can start as a free user and use it for a while, and then say, oh, now I do want to add those features and convert.
From talking to Phil Lieben over at Evernote, that seems to be what Evernote's strategy is. They always have given away Evernote, and they have a premium yearly subscription, which is a little different than pay once thing, but still similar enough. And I think the conversion rate is similar, and he's very happy.
The
Go ahead.
The amazing thing about Overcast is I was just looking. He gives you some of the stats inside the preferences screen, and I only listen to I work at home, so I don't have time to listen to a lot of podcasts. When I used to listen to them all the time when I commute, but even on my schedule, it saved me 7 hours in the last 2 months. Not by artificially accelerating what people say, but giving you a perfectly listenable podcast and just trimming down the excess amounts of blank area.
Right.
And that to me is incredibly valuable. That's 7 more shows that I managed to fit in that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Oh.
It's also a feature that you don't see on the other podcast apps,
Right.
which sets it apart. What I loved about the graphs that he was showing was that it's not one of these apps that it made a lot of money off of its initial publicity and then it started tailing off, and now it's just sort of at some sort of a nominal event. It seems to have really become part of the vocabulary of the App Store right now. It's a really good choice of an app too, because people get tired of a game, but once you get like a sort of a pantry staple app like a podcast app, where this is something that almost everybody is going to want to try and almost everybody is going to see the advantages of, that's the sort of thing where it can continue to sell at a good sustainable rate month after month after month.
I think a nice, $10,000 a month average income. I think for a lot of developers, they'd be very happy with that.
And keep in mind, Marco is the only one who works on this. He doesn't have people doing his support for him. He doesn't have other programmers working for him. So really the premise here is, can one person build an app and have that income be enough that that's their salary?
Yeah.
And now Marco also has a podcast, so he's got 2 salaries. So he's half podcaster, half developer. But these numbers seem like they would support a single developer pretty well.
And I like that.
But the big thing is that I wouldn't jump on the Marco doesn't need the money, but it really does point to this and with Monument Valley. This really isn't a quit your job and start developing apps sort of job. This is have a steady source of income that you can live on while you're developing this app in whatever time you have and whatever attention you can pay to it, because this wasn't something he just batted out in a few weeks. This was something he'd been thinking about for a long time and then developing for a year and a half. And if he was, and in that time, that app is not generating any revenue. So
exactly,
it's helpful that he had everyone I know who's a successful app developer was able to do that essentially by giving up all of their free time for a good solid year to get that first app out the door. There's no gold rush. It really is about working hard, being very, very meticulous, having a game plan, and having really not just having a creative game plan, but having a business plan for how am I going to get this developed and how much time can I afford to put into this before I release it.
You do have to point out that because of his well-known name, because of his podcast, he probably has a little marketing advantage.
Oh yeah.
When Overcast came out, everybody reported that here's a new podcast app from Marco Arment. But that carries a lot
that's
of weight.
part of being an indie developer is you've got to market yourself.
Build yourself. That's
and
right.
Because your audience is going to be the people you can market your products to.
Marco writes, overall, I'm very satisfied with Overcast's finances so far. It's not setting the world on fire, but it's making good money. For most people, the App Store won't be a lottery windfall, but making a decent living is within reach for many. And he also points out that after the self-employment penalties in taxes and benefits, that's one way to look at it. It's not exactly a penalty. If you had an employer, they'd pay half of it. But I'm probably coming in under what I could get at a full-time job in the city. And that's the point, is that as a self-employed person, anybody who's been self-employed knows this, certainly in the States anyway, you pay higher self-employment taxes, and you have to buy your own benefits and all of that. He says, but I don't have to actually work for someone else on something I don't care about. I can work in my nice home office, drink my fussy coffee, take a nap after lunch if I want to, and be present for my family as my kid grows up. And actually, as a parent, I think that may be the single most important value for all of this is, and we're all looking for ways to be, the traditional model of, let's say, working at Apple and developing the iPhone is you don't see your family for years. And I think we're all looking for a more gentle, sustainable way of living. And so I think that's a good point.
I had a really good job in product marketing for enterprise, and I went to do iMore, and I get to work at home. I get to see my friends. I get to see my godchildren, and I haven't regretted it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the many wise things that one of my best friends used to say all the time is that, you're going to be working for whatever job you do, you're going to be doing that for about 50 years. That's a long time to spend doing something you hate.
Actually, I come to think of it, all four of us are self-employed. Jason most recently in the
newly so. Yeah, no. What Marco said totally resonates with me. I totally see where he's coming from. Yeah, I drink tea instead of coffee. Otherwise, I'm right there with him. Yeah.
So we're all sitting down someplace with 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon. Yes. We're all self-employed.
Yeah, we're taking naps. Anybody too could take a nap. That's it.
I can't do it. I'm not a napper. I just am not a napper.
Interesting
I can't do it.
But you could if you wanted to.
I guess. Yeah.
To me, the interesting thing is people like Marco, people like Lauren Brichter, the people who can make an app on their own can just utilize this platform to do the entire thing.
That's what's so remarkable. That's right.
Well, I mean, the reason Overcast has been so successful too is because Marco put in a year trying to figure out some pretty radical things with audio. Most podcast apps use the basic audio functions that are available in the system.
Why did he do that? What's wrong with Core Audio?
Well, because he decided, I mean, it's the reasons that I think that it's been successful. He decided that he wanted a podcast app where when you make it run at 1.2x or 1.4x, you don't get the little clicking sound that Core Audio does when you ask for it. It sounds smooth. He had this idea for Smart Speed where it's analyzing for gaps, for silence gaps, like what radio stations do to squeeze the silence out. And he wanted that in a podcast app because he wanted to be able to listen to more podcasts. And Core Audio just didn't, on its own, the audio stuff didn't do it. He needed to go one layer deeper. And that, he's scratching his own itch there, right? Which that's part of it. And then he's a programmer. He has the ability to build those tools.
Programmer,
and as a result, he's built a tool that's got some features that will be very hard for his competitors to replicate, even though now they know what they are. And that, that's one of the reasons it's been successful. And that does go back to him spending a lot of time on the technical side of this.
I have never listened to our shows on Overcast. Anybody do that? What does it sound like? Is it a lot faster?
And the thing that's nice is the audio boost also will equalize sounds of different podcasts or different volumes. And sometimes they are. Audio boost just make sure that, you can hear them no matter what sort of traffic or road conditions.
One of the things I did very early on when we started Twit, and I was the guy doing the engineering, was make sure we heavily compressed audio so that it would that's exactly right. There was very little dynamic range.
But some podcasts don't do a very good job of that.
And the truth is, the funny thing is, when I gave up that responsibility, we've slowly slipped back to a full dynamic range podcast, which I don't like, but I can't convince anybody to compress the hell out of it.
In some scenarios, a dynamic podcast can sound really good, but then in other scenarios, it doesn't. And so Marco's voice boost,
it's actually smart.
Just does that. Yeah,
I think I'm gonna have to recommend people start using.
What happens though is then somebody talks to you live, and they think that you may be drunk because why aren't you talking faster? And then they realize halfway through the conversation, oh, I'm used to listening to you at 2x.
I like Andy said, it gave him a couple features that really set it apart.
Yeah.
I like Overcast, but there are a couple of shows where I kind of like the way that the speaker has a tone of voice where they will pause judiciously. Like I can't use Overcast with the Stephen Tobolowsky files.
Well, you can because it's got a per show setting, so you can just turn those off for those shows.
Oh, cool.
The implication of that statement was that on that feature, not on the on Overcast. There are other things that I wouldn't say that I don't like about Overcast. It's just that it's a different. It doesn't. It's not a podcast player for the way that I listen to podcasts.
Interesting.
But like the podcast catcher that I use all the time, it has a horrible interface, but everything I want to do, it's there in the interface somewhere. So once I set it, I can easily get it. I'm talking about an Android app, but but I use for media I use iOS almost as much as I use my Android phone. But I don't find that as a fault in Overcast. I think that I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that it really is a let's do these features extremely well and let's make it as good an experience as possible. But the whole thing really does point to how the user never gets to see how much work even the simplest things can be. And that I think is the signature difference between developing for iOS and developing for other mobile operating systems. That we've all spoken to so many different mobile developers, and as much griping as there is about Xcode and about how Apple runs developer relations, nobody says that that iOS isn't the easiest, the least hassle-free thing to develop for. Simple things like making sure that an audio that if one app wants the audio channel that another app has, how difficult is it to make an app that behaves properly in Android versus how easy is it to do in iOS? So I think that every time that you see these screaming complaints, oh, this is 99 cents or this is $5, it should be free, you don't know how hard it is to do even some simple things in so many different apps.
Well, and here's something I didn't know. Marco says the biggest expense in 2014 was a trademark agreement. He had to pay, I guess somebody else owned the name Overcast, and Marco said my other name sucked, so he paid $12,000 for the right to use the name Overcast and to trademark it.
Coexistence agreement.
Yeah, I don't know who else Overcast is. He also has spent some money on trademarking. He trademarked not only Overcast, but Smart Speed and Voice Boost. He says anybody is welcome to copy those features, but you can't call them that, which I thought was kind of interesting. I love it. Marco says, you may think I'm a jerk for writing this. I don't know who would think he's a jerk for writing this. He says he was inspired by not only Monument Valley, but Unread and Dash for Mac, a couple of other apps where revenue numbers are posted. I think this is what I love about the internet economy, is this idea that, you know, it's not going to hurt me to until the internet, everybody kept all this stuff very hush-hush. Unless you were a publicly traded company. It was one of the real arguments against being a publicly traded company. Yeah. Is that
my boss insists on putting our reader number at the bottom of every page. And he's like, if it goes down, you know, it's your fault. So who cares if we put the number up there or not?
There you go.
I think it's eminently healthy for any company to be more transparent about how they operate. Because it gives your customers a little bit more of understanding and ownership over what you do, and also they might hesitate just a little bit before saying that this person just doesn't get it. I can't tell you about times I've had conversations with developers where in the back of my mind I'm saying, gee, I can't believe that you don't have a preset for this. And I asked them about it, and they said, well, here's why we don't have a preset for that, because here's what we'd have to do in order to make it work. I think that if Apple's been getting, you know, a few brickbats in the past couple weeks about how, things used to just work and now they just don't work anymore. Mostly it's because people forget about the times that Apple things didn't work. But I think it's largely because Apple will never do, we're thinking about doing an eyeglass wearable computer. We're going to make about 10,000 of these and sell them to people who are really eager to try them out. Maybe we'll make them into a product. Maybe we won't. Okay, a year later, we're not going to continue to do this. Apple never does that. They always present the big dog and pony show. We've been working on this for 3 years, and now it's perfect. Now it's wonderful. And now you're welcome because here's our latest perfect product. I think that people would have a better opinion of Apple if they understand just how much they work to decide that, no, we're not going to have a home button and then something else next to it. It's just going to be the home button on this device, and that's it.
In other related developer news, Apple's Swift is apparently getting some traction. RedMonk does a language ranking out of Stack Overflow, and each I guess it's been 2 quarters, so maybe each half year they tell you which programming languages are most popular on GitHub and Stack Overflow. 2 of the most used programmers' sites. Stack Overflow is where programmers gather to talk, and of course GitHub is where they gather to store their stuff. Here's a fabulous chart, which you probably can't see, but Swift is
quadrant.
Huh?
This looks like a magic quadrant.
Magic quadrant.
It looks like an XKCD cartoon.
Holy cow. So the X is popularity on GitHub by number of projects. The Y is popularity on Stack Overflow by number of tags. And you could see, you know, the most popular on both is Java, I'm sad to say. Nimrod seems to be one of the least popular languages. I'm not even familiar with that. But Java, JavaScript, C Sharp, PHP, Python, C++, CSS, which isn't really a language, but we'll leave it in there. Objective-C, C, and Ruby. But Swift is coming on. What are you laughing at?
No, I can't help but look from like my favorite language, AppleScript, and then I can see where Fortran is way, way above that on both axes.
Oh dear!
Like,
oh dear! Oh dear! Oh dear!
Fortran,
Fortran, who's using that anymore? Swift is right here, kind of high up on the graph, right next to Groovy, Clojure, ActionScript, and assembly language. Thank you. And MATLAB. MATLAB's pretty popular among the Stack Overflow folks. Common Lisp is kind of an outlier there. Popular on GitHub, but you don't see a lot of people talking about it on Stack Overflow. Don't know why.
I can't see logo. Where's logo?
Logo? I just got a robot that I can program. It has a pen. It's just kind of like Turtle Graphics all over again. But you have to do it in C++. It's like, what? What? Nevertheless, Swift has apparently been coming on strong, which is good news. So are Julia and Rust. So
It jumped like 46 places, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Find that fascinating.
Congrats to Chris Latner and the compiler team.
During our last ranking, Swift was listed as the language to watch, an obvious choice given its status as the Apple-anointed successor to the number 10 language on our list, Objective-C. But yeah, it's 46 spots. It went from 68 to 22 on the list. Now one spot behind CoffeeScript and just ahead of Lua. And if you're not a programmer, you must just be laughing right now at the names the programmers choose for those languages. CoffeeScript actually is going down, which is interesting. It was a JavaScript kind of compiler alternative that created JavaScript. And Google's App Store, the Google Play Store, and developer community has also been growing. In fact, in 2014, according to App Figures, grew faster than Apple. That's for the it exceeds the developer community for Google Play exceeded Apple's for the third year in a row. 388,000 different developers. Now, the number of developers, I don't know if that's a meaningful stat, but it is a larger raw number. Overall, app development is also on the rise, with all three app stores growing by at least 50% last year. But the three are Apple, Google, and Amazon.
Apple, Google, and Amazon.
And actually, even Amazon's beating the App Store in terms of growth.
Well, growth is an acceleration measure, though. If you have a small percentage and you grow, then yeah.
That's right. If you want to, here's the total number of developers by App Store. Blue is iOS. Green is Google Play. Orange is Amazon. You could see the shift happened in 2012. That's when Google for the first time started beating iOS.
We used to joke about this, that people said there has to be a third ecosystem. It's going to be Windows. It's going to be BlackBerry. And the joke was it's going to be other Amazon. And whether you talk about devices and you have Chinese Android and regular Android, or you talk about app stores and you have Google Play and Amazon, it turns out Android really is the third ecosystem as well.
Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing that Windows is doing such a bad job of getting developers to embrace multi-touch. They're still, again, wonderful desktop apps, but you get out of Surface 3 and you're like, great, I'm using all these Windows apps. Now let's look at these wonderful multi-touch things that I can run. And like, oh, there's a text editor. Okay. It's just, and it's not like this has been a new phenomenon. Like the modern interface has been around for a couple of years now, and you would have thought that there'd be some sort of uptake, but nothing now.
I confess it's a little frustrating. This I have a Nokia Lumia 1520 in my hand, and it's actually a really 6-inch phone, great phone.
They're great phones. I love the UI. I think that they know how to. This interface is better suited for handheld use than I think any other UI that's out there in terms of I'm going to wake this thing up. I want to get something done in 5 to 10 seconds and then put it back down again. I don't think that you're going to do better than what they've got there. But the apps just aren't there, and part of it is a small part of it is because Google just says we're not going to build anything native for it, but not the whole world is Google native apps. If they can't get developers to really embrace this, it certainly has to do with something with maybe the 2 to 5% market share, depending on how you calculate it. But man, they're just not getting that. What I would have expected to see is, I guess what I'm getting at is that I would have expected to see one of those. Here's to the crazy one sort of developers that this operating system just completely speaks to them, and they're going to do something great. They're going to make a Monument Valley sort of thing, whether it's a game or productivity app, and even that is so hard to find on Windows Phone.
There's two things for that, though. Like on one hand, BlackBerry, they had a very small market share too, and instead of fighting for BB10, they just added the Amazon App Store now.
Right.
So there's a tiny little amount of that Amazon App Store stuff that's probably BlackBerry. But also, I think all those artisanal developers, like the Lauren Brichters and like the Marco Armonts, they were historically Mac developers, and they naturally gravitated towards iOS, where the Windows install base was enterprise or people making a lot of different kinds of apps that didn't lend themselves to that sort of artisanal, popular support of a new platform from that same company.
We have actually, I think, 2 different Twit apps on here. Dmitry Lyalin's Twit, and then there's something called Twit Radio. Twit Now, actually there's 4. Compulsive Technologies, Twit 5, Twit View, 6, Twit.tv. So there are quite a few, interestingly, quite a few Twit apps on here. And I I think that's because it isn't hard to develop for, but I think if you're running for the larger market, you consider the number of units sold, which is very small. The focus Microsoft's made on not growing in the premium end. They haven't, this is the last high-end phone they released. It's a year old. Most of the new phones, all the new phones are aimed at the third world, at developing nations, at markets where there's not a lot of money to be made in app development.
Their community is amazingly, like, there's that many Twit apps because of Windows Weekly, and people love Windows Weekly. They make Twit. We have a Windows Central app. We have if they can put up a post about a Facebook bug update on Windows Central, and 800 people will comment in 5 minutes. I've never seen a community like that, but it is exactly what you said. It's not a community that's being targeted by traditional developers.
Also, Microsoft has, frankly, pissed off developers over time by adding APIs, changing their strategy. It's I think a number, I won't speak to developers, but I think I would guess a number of developers are a little cheesed off at Microsoft and said, I want to go somewhere where A, I can make money, but B, I don't have to relearn everything every year.
I don't know. I think it's the third, it's the third platform problem here, which is costs a lot of money to develop apps. If you're a business that's targeting a broad audience. And you're like, all right, well, we're going to go on iPhone first. We're going to go iOS first. Most businesses make that decision. All right, but we've got to do Android. There are lots of Android devices out there, so we've got to do that next. So now we're going to do that. And then you get to the point where you say, all right, now what do we spend our money on? Do we go back to iOS? Do we maintain iOS and Android? Or do we go and develop a Windows Phone app? And I think in a lot of those cases, they're just saying we would rather put more money into our iOS and Android apps because we have to be there. And we've gotten along without Windows Phone for now. It's not that big an audience. And it's a tough place to be number 3.
It's Windows 10 event day, too, which is ironic.
Yeah, tomorrow, well, and that's kind of where I'm segueing. Tomorrow, Windows 10, the consumer preview will be announced, and there's a full day of stuff. We'll be covering it live starting a little before 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern time. And then TNT will probably continue running the coverage because normally Windows Weekly would be at 11 a.m. Our time, but both Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley are in Redmond for that announcement and are going to be getting briefed in the afternoon in private briefings. There will be a live stream from Microsoft in the morning. And we'll come on, we'll do a Windows Weekly right after TN2 at about 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 Eastern Time, 24:30 UTC tomorrow. So we will be talking about Windows 10, and presumably, we'll see, but presumably Microsoft will talk about another very important part of their strategy, which is to eliminate or merge Windows RT, which was their very strange ARM-based version of Windows 8.
That's the version that doesn't run anything.
And it was just weird, and then merge that with Windows Phone. And then going forward, and Satya Nadella said this a number of times, there'll be one Windows. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see that strategy. It may be that mobile is over for Microsoft, and that would
very
be
different than Apple's strategy.
Yeah, I know. It's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, but Apple doesn't have what Microsoft has. That they do have a design language that really is portable across multiple size screens.
Well,
Google has the same.
But that's exactly what Microsoft's now trying to do, aren't they?
Yeah, but I think that maybe they're trying to make a play where they're not going to try to. I think they're trying to get Windows users to buy Windows phones, not because they. Traditionally, we think about phones as a totally separate entity from the desktop experience or even our tablet experience. I think that they're really trying to sell hard the fact that, no, you have one device that runs one operating system. Why would you not want to have a phone that runs the exact same thing as your desktop does? And if they can do if they can do one experience that seamlessly transcends every single piece of hardware better than Apple does, maybe Windows users, who still are predominantly the most significant users on the planet right now, if the next time they want to buy a phone, when they're in that AT&T or Verizon store, they see, wow, this Android phone and this iOS device can't do what this Windows phone can do. This will solve a problem in my life. And since I'm not I just came in with a blank slate, wanting to spend $200 on a phone because my old one is broken. Maybe that's their way in if they do it well.
It's not a car, it's not a truck, it's a minivan.
Yeah.
But look what a great job. This is I just think for Apple users who have never seen a Windows phone, just looking at the front page where there's live tiles, which give you a lot of information. It's kind of a mix between Apple's static icons and Google's widgets.
No, they're beautiful.
It's beautiful. And then if you go to the Twit app on here, Dimitri has done a great job of making a native Windows Phone app that just does a beautiful job of showing off our stuff. I mean, it really is gorgeous. And it would be a shame. I feel the same way about BOS. It's a shame when something great and gorgeous.
Look at that right edge. That's what I love about that interface.
Let's go back to
the idea that it's just quietly showing you, oh, by the way, there's more content off to the right if you want to flip over that way. So if you're never lost in the sense of where have I just been and where do I next go if I'm looking for something.
Right.
Like that's why I have so much respect for this operating system. It's a little bit heartbreaking that it hasn't become even a double-digit percentage of the user space out there. I mean, if the Lumia 1020 had a much better operating system, I'd be, because I like cameras, I'd be so
great
tempted
in
by
this.
it.
And this is the 1520, but of course the 1020 is even better.
Yeah, I still have the 1020.
Yeah.
I do understand the criticism for Windows Phone. For example, some people just don't like that those live tiles move. They're used to icons being static because you can immediately recognize them. And if someone's picture changes in their contact and they can't find the person, that annoys them. And the information density is low, and they're used to having lines and lines of text, and they have to page around a lot.
Sure, there's going to be complaints. I understand that.
So it's not for everybody, but for people who do like that display. And I like the fact that it's different. It really is truly a different take on mobile operating systems.
Yeah. It's interesting that Apple has really put their investment in the right place about making sure that everybody's first experience with their new piece of hardware is the best experience possible. And you can't get any simpler. You can't get any more idiot-proof than here is a grid of icons that represent your apps. Keep scrolling, you will find the app that you want. Tap it in order to launch it. And I think that someone who hasn't used Windows Phone before will look at that screen and say, oh my God, it's such a confusing mess. I want to have that little grid of icons that I'm familiar with.
Oh, you get used to it really quickly.
But that's the point. I mean, Apple makes sure that the demo experience in your first week is going to be great, but an experience like this is after about a month, once you get it's like, oh, I'm getting so much more done with just a glance than I could if this was just a grid of icons.
From my point of view, the really what killed Windows Phone is Google. By their lack of support for it, they have effectively killed it. Only because I live in the Google
But they're the everyone company, Leo. They wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and I have to wonder.
They killed it.
Well, okay. So, by the way, now I can, thanks to Microsoft's improvements, I can at least get my Google Calendar in the calendar, my Google Contacts in the contacts. But I use Google Voice and Hangouts as my SMS because I use multiple phones, and it won't support that. There's no way to support that. Yeah. So that's extraordinarily frustrating. It means that also I would use this phone as a daily driver, but I can't.
Do you use Cortana?
Yeah, Cortana's great.
Yeah, and I think that's my favorite
the voice speech. That's the Siri.
My favorite voice interface ever.
Yeah.
Because not only is it more powerful than Siri, I mean, not only can you do more things with it, but also they really put a lot more work into developing the character than Apple puts into
Siri. Well, they started because she's a Halo character. They started with an actual character, right? Siri was made up out of nowhere. And this is not the Windows Phone show, but we bring it up because the distinction is so interesting, and I think it's so telling, and it shows how you don't have to be the best or to dominate.
As an old-time Mac user, I listened to you talk about Windows Phone, and I think these are the same complaints we always felt about the Mac back in the 90s, that it's like I can't do all these things that my IT people want me to have access to, but I can't do it on my Mac, or I can't do it really well. Apple's tried to do something to work around it, but there are these pieces that aren't supported, and it's so much better than the alternative, and yet why is nobody using it?
And
it
it's
sounds
sad because
really familiar.
It's frankly not Microsoft's fault in this case.
It sounds like the old Amiga story that I went through.
Yeah, that's
we've all
true.
been there, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, one way or the other.
And you mentioned BOS, which was beautiful too, and it just didn't make it.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back. Lots more. Jason Snell from 6colors.com. Okay.
Yeah. I paid the money. I got the
You got the com, which is a great, mix now of both a personal blog, but also increasingly journalistic coverage of
my tech site.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you.
You're doing such a great job, and of course, there's a bunch of podcasts there. I highly recommend you click the podcast tab there because you're doing a network now. You've got everything.
I have many podcasts.
Yeah, and frankly, so does Rene Ritchie.
He does.
I don't know why I have these competitors on the show. You must leave now, Andy. Keep doing the good work. Stop doing. Don't do any. Wait a minute. He's also doing podcasts.
He also has a podcast.
God, you infected us, Leo. You made us love podcasts so much.
Podcasts are great. Rene from imore.com, and of course they have the great Debug podcast, among others, and Andy Ihnatko of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Andy's Almanac on the 5x5. Dan does a great job with that. Yesterday we had one of the Apple founders on Triangulation yesterday. That was so much fun. You remember Ron Wayne?
Mm-hmm.
People are going, who? Well, there was Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs, and Ron Wayne, right? Yeah, everybody knows that. He's actually great. He lives in a double wide in Pahrump, Nevada.
Sure.
Just down the dirt road from Art Bell. And he was adult supervision, worked with Steve Jobs at Atari. He had some stories about Steve at Atari. And Jobs and Wozniak had created the Apple I, and they said, we need somebody who can do an inventory control system, for instance, who can be adult supervision. Ron, you want to participate? Yeah, sure, what the heck. They formed the Apple Computer Company and he was a draftsman, that beautiful Isaac Newton Apple logo that Apple never used, or actually used only for the Apple I.
Yeah, that's the one that's so detailed that you would never make a corporate logo.
That's what he said. It would be a terrible choice for a modern computer company. And what I said to Ron yesterday is, this reflected the kind of quirky position that the computer industry was in at this time. This was the kind of stuff you'd get. And I think it's quite beautiful. I think he did a beautiful job with that. Anyway, Ron Wayne, if you haven't heard the Triangulation from yesterday, he's a gentleman, a smart fellow in his 80s now, and sold his stake. He got out. He said, you guys, first of all, it's not they didn't incorporate. They formed a company. So all three members were liable if they got sued. And he said, as the only one with any assets, I knew it would all come down on my head if these guys screwed up. So he sold his 10% in Apple back to Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak for $800, and then later another $1,500, giving up all claims on Apple. He'd probably have a little bit of money if he hadn't. But you know what? He's a happy guy. He said, you make your decisions, and he said, I made the best decision I could based on the information.
Wasn't he always also burned once? And he had a bad experience before, and it wasn't just idle fear.
He has many patents. He was talking about this, and he did a slot machine company, and got ripped off mightily, and he said never again. So he had been burned, exactly, and you know what? That's fine. Watch the interview. I think you'll enjoy it. It was really a fun guy. Our show today that's Triangulation, and it's available at twit.tv/TRI if you want to get it. Our show today brought to you by Squarespace. We love Squarespace.com. They just launched version 7, Squarespace 7, completely redesigned interface. So for you as the blogger or the content creator, as the photographer, the person using Squarespace, you're going to love it because it's so easy to create your own professional-looking website or online portfolio. Things like live editing on a single screen, so there's no more, go back and forth toggling with the site manager in the preview mode. You could see exactly how your changes will look immediately, not just on your screen, but on tablets and mobile devices. That's one thing Squarespace does so well. Something that is called mobile responsive design. Every site looks great, no matter what size screen. This is the way we have to do it now. No more separate mobile sites. You just got to look good on every size screen. They've added 14 new designs. Now you choose from over 30, including templates designed for specific professions. So they have a musician's template. They have an artist's template, architect's template, restaurants, e-commerce. They've got one called Fulton that features long scrolling pages with big background images. That's the new style. I think they call it parallax in general, web designers. Full-width galleries and albums. Their portfolio, if you're a photographer, they've got a portfolio app that you use on the iPad that pulls images from your site for client approval. They also have a note app, a metric app that not only measures visits but also social media follows. The blog app, which is available on both iOS and Android, lets you post content. These guys are knocking it out of the park. If you're a developer, you'll love the developer platform. It's what Squarespace uses itself, the same coding platform that they use internally. And that means a lot of agencies use this, and they resell Squarespace sites. Access to Getty images, $10 each. Pick from thousands of professional Getty images for your site. E-commerce, of course, at all plan levels. Social media, it's easy to use. And it starts at $8 a month. And when you sign up for a year, that includes the domain name free. So Squarespace has it all. Hosting, software, easy to use, powerful, beautiful. It's kind of like the Apple of website hosts. Start a free 2-week trial right now. You don't need to give them a credit card. You don't even need to give them our name MacBreak. They won't ask you. Just, play with it. They won't ask you for anything. But it'll give you 2 weeks to really, bang on the tire, kick the tires, bang on the doors. You can even import items from your existing site so you can see what it looks like. And then all I ask when you sign up, please use our name, MacBreak, and you'll get 10% off, and then they'll know you heard about it on MacBreak Weekly. Squarespace.com, free for 2 weeks, no credit card required. Use the offer code MacBreak when you sign up for 10% off. Squarespace. Start here. Go anywhere. Squarespace.com. Okay, more patents.
All right. Back to patents.
Apple.
Yay.
Apple. What was the? What was the
Timothy Van Patten now?
Yeah. Which one?
His tennis career is underappreciated.
What was the one that it hit the GoPro stock? Apple patented some sort of camera.
Yeah, sports camera.
A sports camera.
Right.
Now, again, I got to point out, it doesn't mean they're going to do it. But stock market went, whoa.
But people can make money on the news and the rumors, Leo.
That's right.
Yeah.
According to Fortune, Apple's new video camera patent sends GoPro shares into a tailspin. 13%. That's not a tailspin. Midday trading down to 49.45, their lowest level in 4 months. USPTO published a list of 34 total newly granted patents for Apple, including one for a wearable video camera that could be hooked up to helmets or scuba masks. Kind of similar to GoPro. You know what? This is the problem. I don't know. The stock market just woke up, but this is the problem with GoPro. Anybody can make a GoPro. Mm-hmm. GoPro succeeds because they have brilliant marketing. But
not a product, you're a feature, right?
Right. They do have a significant revenue, $1 billion revenue in 2014, which means I would imagine there are other companies looking at getting in the business.
Well, Tony Fadell runs Dropcam now too. He can stick that on Google Glass, and he's got Google Glass and Dropcam now. How do you like them? Stock.
We talked about how Marco was smart and put some secret sauce in his app Overcast. I don't think there's any secret sauce in what GoPro's doing. I mean, I've seen dozens of similar things. It's really all about what a great marketing job.
I do worry that GoPro could end up like the Flip, right?
Right.
Which was a huge product, and it got bought out and died because it was really something that was kind of replicable in other technology.
I recommended this last week on the show.
HTC.
This is the HTC Re, which is basically the flip phone or the flip camera.
Flip camera, yeah.
Reinvented as a periscope. I'm going to review it on Before You Buy today. Actually, it's a little overpriced. It's like $179. It could be used kind of like a GoPro, but what's cool about it, and they just added this feature, is you can stream live to YouTube. So I can push a button right now, see it on my phone, and literally we'd be live on YouTube right now.
You can stream the stream, Leo.
I can stream the stream. I've done that actually. If you go to youtube.com/Leo Laporte, I think that's the name of it. I think that's my personal YouTube channel.
It is a bit of a creepy looking form factor though.
Well, it kind of says I'm a camera. I'm looking at you.
Well, it kind of looks like an inhaler.
It could be an
like
inhaler.
A periscope to me. It's like
that's what I think.
Yeah, surreptitious. Yeah. And then it turns around a little bit.
Or the thing that Indiana Jones hid in the Bantu win with the Nazis.
Exactly. There it is. That's me streaming some other show.
Good quality video.
Actually, this show last week.
But it's really intriguing.
And the audio's good. It's very wide, but that makes it easy to aim because there's no viewfinder.
Going back to GoPro, it's interesting how much the cachet matters. Though, like Beats is just a headphone company, but it had all the cachet of Beats, and so that's worth billions of dollars.
That's a perfect example, actually. Yeah, because headphones, there's no special technology in any of these things.
Well, there's also the reliability that people associate. If I'm gonna be putting this camera in a really, really dangerous situation, we know the track record of this company. I don't think it's necessarily the same category as Flip either, because remember that phones took out Kodak was in that space. Every single you can't list how many companies were making these like Flip kind of knockoffs, and the phones just took out all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's still the need for, I want a camera that will just simply work, that I can bolt to. You're not going to bolt your phone to the side of a car. You're not going to carry you're not going to let your phone like go kayaking with you. You see that great video of the radio controlled glider that crashes into a reef. And before they were, of course, destroyed the entire plane, but the camera was running. So you just see all these turtles just sort of investigating the camera and swimming off. And that's every time that something like that gets posted, someone thinks, oh, well, you're only $250. Maybe I should buy one of those.
Yeah. Such good advertising. Maybe they should have done that with a Flip camera. They would have survived. So patent 2. I don't know if it's a patent. Apple likely to launch a simple stylus. Do they have a patent for it? This would be for the rumored 12.9-inch iPad. This is everything Steve Jobs said they were going to do. A giant iPad Pro industry analyst with a strong track record says that, and there is a Apple patent filing, there will be a stylus for it. This is Ming-Chi Kuo. We've talked about Ming-Chi Kuo a lot, KGI Securities. Said that numerous recent patents filed by Apple and his own research lead him to believe there will be a stylus launched with a iPad Pro. We've talked before. We've given you the Rene Ritchie disclaimer that analysts have a different constituency than actual journalists. But this is credible. Yes, Rene?
Ming-Chi Kuo's got an interesting track record. When it comes to things in the supply chain, he has very good information. When it comes to things that are obvious, he has, incredibly good information. When it comes to stuff that's speculative, he's, hit or miss as anybody else.
Right.
But I think, Apple did patent this stuff, and there's an argument to be made that people are using styluses. Why wouldn't they use an Apple stylus? And the thing with Steve Jobs is it's important to remember that he's talking as a master marketer. He's not talking as somebody who's disclosing product information. And when Apple makes something, it's the same way they don't have arrow keys on the original Mac. They don't want people porting CLI apps, command line apps over to the Mac. They want them to rethink it. And so when you make a multi-touch device, you don't allow multi-window apps. You don't allow styluses. You promote the finger, and people are using apps that make the finger. But then it's apps that use the finger. But then at a certain point, you make a larger screen device, and you want to appeal to artists or to people who take handwritten notes. And you can do that with third-party styluses. But the thing about Apple frameworks is they always work best when it's Apple people who hit the bugs first and Apple people who have to ship a product first. And so if Apple starts making an Apple Pen, so to speak, that'll benefit everybody in the stylus community.
Yeah, and there are a lot of there are, according to this Apple Insider article, dozens, and I think that's probably accurate, of Apple stylus, third-party styluses. Yeah. This is clearly a market.
It's been a damn shame that the iPad has not had one, because I mean this is the Surface 3 tablet, but the Surface 1 was not a fantastic computer, but the fact that it had a 1024 pressure-sensitive Wacom compatible stylus to it meant that how many artists bought their first Windows machines because I have this portable drawing unit. So,
but that's something the iPad's never been, which is pressure sensitive. You can fake it. Do you think the Pro will be?
I think they're missing a trick if they don't make this a creation tool that people can actually draw with. Also, they're starting to run out of ways in which to make these larger sized iPads emphatically the right choice for a certain group of people, because most people are using them in ways where they would much rather have something that's smaller and more compact. Competitors are making tablets that are smaller, more compact, and having a lot more use out of them. And if you want to continue to sell a multi-touch device like that with a larger form factor, you have to say, here's why you want to have the 10-inch version or the 13-inch version, because there are things you can do with a pen creatively that you cannot do with your mere fingers. That said, the big advantage of the iPad is always going to be the app library, and so long as that never changes, there's not a whole lot of rush for Apple to keep reinventing this thing.
Oh, but
it's interesting to me because my background is in art, and I used Wacom tablets for years when I worked in design, and there's just no equivalent. It's why the Galaxy Note is so good. It's the world's smallest Wacom tablet that you can fit in your pocket.
They're actually using Wacom digitizers.
They are, and the digitizer is what makes the difference. At 10.1 and Adonit and those companies have done a really good job using Bluetooth and palm rejection and trying to fake it, but you can tell it's just not the same. So whether Apple, if they're going to do a pen, I really hope they either do a digitizer or they have some new technology that achieves the same results as a digitizer. Because that, to Andy's point, that really does separate it again. It's not about a big phone or a small tablet. It's about a big canvas. It's something that I can use a laptop, but I'm an artist or I'm someone who takes notes in a boardroom. Neil Seibert, who used to be Sammy the Walrus on Twitter, he's a sell-side analyst. I believe it was sell-side analyst. He made a great comment about how useful it would be in enterprise and in education and in creative industries. I was talking to somebody in the medical industry who said how much they would love to be able to use, because they all have, their hospital is just filled with iPads. Everyone gets issued an iPad. And if they could have a really good stylus with it too, it'd be super useful for marking up all the different medical stuff that they look at. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of use people could get out of that sort of technology.
And the software's already there. That's the beauty of it, right? With the apps, the apps are already there that would take advantage of it instantaneously. It's just an issue of you don't want to be drawing on a device. Up to now, you're drawing on a device that's made for fingers, and the pens are just acting like fingers, and that's not good enough.
Would Apple have to do some sort of pressure-sensitive library, and then these apps would have to be updated?
I'd hope so, just because it would make it easier for the developers.
Yeah. I would think so.
All it's really about is palm rejection, and if you can draw on a fingertip, but the thing is, like, this is a bit more precise than this other thing, and the amount of times that I've sketched like on my iPad, and it's like the time you have to basically say I'm gonna have to do a zoom action just to put this one piece of detail in exactly the place I want it. That sort of takes you off of the go gone by the stream, like with this little watercolor pad image that you really want to have when you're sort of in that kind of zone. I just think it's for Apple not to have not have a pen digitizer. I really think they're leaving money off the table.
Well, maybe not.
One of the things that's technologically, what's interesting is that multi-touch is not two-dimensional. Multi-touch is a radiant field, and there is some three-dimensionality to it. Some companies like Nokia use it to let you, or Samsung uses it to let you do hover gestures, or to use it when there's gloves on, because it can tell fingers at a distance. Apple has used it before to determine what finger you're using. It can tell that your one finger is touching the screen, but the other three are folded back behind it. So it's most likely your index finger or your ring finger. And they've used it for palm. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they use it for algorithmically to make the multi-touch experience better. But when you have that sort of, it makes you wonder what else they can do with this if you start combining it with like the force press technology in the watch, or there's different things that can do a lot of interesting things if they start to broaden out what multi-touch does.
I didn't realize that. So Samsung, when it's doing that hover pen thing, that's just part of a multi-touch digitizer.
Yeah, it's a choice of what you want to interpret and how you want to interpret it. Same with the Nokia, you can wear gloves on your touchscreen thing.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have context menus and context help just by simply hovering over a button. That's still one of the kind of, I wouldn't call it a limitation, but one of the things that makes phones a little bit more difficult to use, because you cannot get a hint on what something does until you actually activate this whole layer of help annotations, or just press the button and hope that it doesn't do anything that you're going to regret.
Yeah.
The hover stuff is weird because Fitz's law for multi-touch is that when you hit a glass surface, that's the easiest gesture. And if you have to hold your finger off, it kind of vibrates a little bit and you're too close or you're too far. But if the watch, again, you do a force press and it gives you what's in essence a right mouse click context menu. So there's all sorts of ways to implement that. That's interesting.
We've all heard the rumors that Apple might be thinking about going to ARM for Macintosh, or at least doing some ARM-based Macintoshes. Apparently, so has the CEO of Intel. Brian Kresnich was interviewed on CNBC on Friday, and the host said, or asked, whether he thought Apple might eventually drop Intel chips from the Mac in favor of its own ARM-based processors. Kresnich said, I just hear the same rumors. Wow, that's unusually forthright. Our relationship with Apple is strong. Their products are great. Apple's always going to choose the supplier who can provide them the most amount of capability and innovation for them to build on, for them to innovate. They're a company based on innovation. Our job is to continue to deliver parts that have that capability, to give them that, and that are better than our competitors, and then they want to use our parts. So I wake up every morning making sure that across the board, whether it's Apple or Lenovo or Dell or any of our customers, we have to provide the most competitive part. He's not exactly shaking in his boots.
Well, he's one of the few people who knows.
Do you think he actually knows? Like Tim Cook calls him up and says, hey, by the way, just want to let you know, in 2015, no more Intel.
There's a lot to decompress in this, because Apple is a company that has prototyped almost anything you could think of.
Right.
If anyone on the web says Apple should do this, Apple has likely done this, had a bunch of people try it out and made an informed opinion about whether it's a prototype or whether it should be a product. And that includes ARM Macs, especially low, like things like a MacBook Air running ARM, running iOS, all these different things. But designing a chip is one thing. Getting these chips produced in mass quantity is another thing. That Apple's not a fab; they're a design company, and producing millions and millions of chips. As we saw, like one of the rumors is that we don't have an iPad Mini 3 with the same specs as an iPad Air 2 is because they simply couldn't make enough Apple A8 chips this year to satisfy all those devices. And we start adding Macs into it. Could they produce enough high-end ARM chips to supply iOS devices and Do they want to become a foundry? How would they handle compatibility with Windows apps? It's a really huge question. But I don't put it past Apple to say, hey, Intel, how are those Broadwell chips doing? Is it going to be another few months delayed? Because we've got this stuff in the lab, and man, is it power efficient? And boy, is it getting powerful. Oh, it'll be ready next month. Thank you.
Well, that's one question I have, because I did just buy the new Broadwell based Dell, which is very much like a MacBook Air. It's very light, great battery life, et cetera, et cetera. And it's unusual and we mentioned this last week, it's unusual for somebody besides Apple to have the first shipment of chips and make the first notebooks based on a new Intel platform. And Apple has not. And you told me, Rene, I bought the Dell because you told me, don't wait for Apple to do a Broadwell-based MacBook Air.
Well, not this month, I meant.
What?
It'll be this year. I
thought you meant like next.
No, real
next
person
quarter.
Time. Leo Laporte time is going to be forever.
Forever. I can't wait.
Time,
well, yeah, and I do want to review the Broadwell U platform and all of that stuff. And this is not a faster chip; it's just a more efficient chip. So you feel like there will be. See, what's interesting about this Dell, and we'll do a review as soon as it comes. But what's interesting about the Dell is it's a Retina display, basically, in a MacBook Air form factor. It is a 13-inch display. The thing is as small as your 11-inch MacBook Air, and lighter. So the whole thing is quite intriguing.
That's the rumor about that 12-inch MacBook Air.
Right, bezel. It looks very much like
that same kind of product.
Concept picture of the MacBook Air. Of course, the thing that was most interesting about the MacBook Air, and we talked about that also on a show this week, but I can't remember, is this new USB port, this single port on the MacBook Air. When were we talking about that? Was that, which show? Was that this show?
Last week, maybe?
Was it last? Well,
I know that we talked about it last week, sir.
Somebody talked about the idea that this made sense, that we were rapidly moving into, I guess it was on Twit on Sunday. It was probably Ben Thompson of Stratechery. That made sense for Apple. Not contrary to our reaction, which is what? There's one port for power, for USB, for Thunderbolt, for monitor. One port on the whole thing? There's not even a separate power port. One port? Yeah. And he said, no, this makes a lot of sense because what we're doing is we're moving away from the notion that the computer is a hub. It isn't a hub anymore. It's one of many devices that you have.
And Apple's very good at being aggressive at pushing toward where it's going, even though it may not be quite there yet.
I don't know. It's like maybe the computer isn't a hub, but people still need to occasionally put a camera card into something.
No,
or
not allowed. No more.
It's I don't know. It's
the iPad of computers, Andy.
That's exactly what I was saying. I mean, it makes sense as your lightweight accessory. It makes sense if you anticipate that this user is never going to want to attach anything to this whatsoever, that they aren't even going to be really that interested in finding a power port in the middle of the day, because whatever the battery life is going to be for this, they're not going to be sitting down to use this for 6 or 7 hours straight. And that's why I go back to what I've been saying from the beginning, which is, as I keep looking at this, holds up in my own mind that for $500, this is a hell of a product. At $600, it's an interesting product. At $900, it's what's the point?
I definitely don't agree with that. This feels to me, this rumored 12-inch MacBook Air feels to me like it is a $1,000 or $1,100 product, and I think. I mean, Apple,
if it's Retina,
this is very this is
with a cramped keyboard and with all the other crap they put into this.
But you're talking to a guy who's using the 11-inch MacBook.
Yeah, so this is.
Go ahead.
So this is a very Apple sort of thing to do, I think.
I mean, what if there were no bezels on this screen? It were a Retina screen and it went all the way to the edge, and it was 13 inches in the same form factor. People have said who've held the Dell, it's so light it feels like there's nothing. It's crap that there's nothing in it.
And I mean, I guess my argument.
Your 11-inch.
That's fine. Okay. You were gentle. The argument is that Apple is always going with the Air. If you think about the original Air, it was pushing it too hard, right? It was not ready. It was too thin. It dropped.
Was that also an 11-inch?
It had one USB port. No, it was a 13. But
okay.
it dropped down to one USB port, which was painful. But I feel like the MacBook Air now is so fully functional that Apple, if this
we've gone wireless in so many ways.
Exactly.
Your iPhone used to have to be connected to iTunes via USB cable.
So
not anymore.
I don't disagree with Andy in saying perhaps you would want to plug in a USB device, perhaps you would want to plug in a card, but I can also see Apple saying, you're going to just take pictures with your iPhone.
Right.
You don't need it. It'll sync in through the cloud.
Yeah,
And that leads you to an interesting place where that product is a super portable thing. The first generation, everybody kind of groans about it, but then by the second or third generation, everybody's like, oh, actually, this is great. That's what that product feels like to me. And it does feel like that they'll keep the other Airs around and drop their prices and let this one kind of settle in as a Retina device on at 1100 or something.
I can certainly agree with that. Also, we're forgetting that the first MacBook Air was like $1,800, was it?
$1,800 and then an extra $1,000 if you wanted the SSD.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah. And it was just,
God, I forgot that.
Holy cow. It was just
for a 60 gig SSD.
And I'm sure I bought it immediately, right?
But the thing is, it's like people often laugh at Apple's competitors because they got into the thing is that's what Apple does so well. They don't get into the market when the market is not ready for something. They make sure they got this thing right. They won't get there first, but they'll get there with the right product. The MacBook Air is one of those counterexamples that says no, it was a crappy computer. It was not that it took them 2 years to refine it. It's that they released it 2 years too early. They were selling these things to people who were really desperate for something that thin and light because there was so much pain associated with that. When I look at and again, we are of course in my column about this, I refer to this as the Hypo Mac, just to make sure that people realize we're talking about a hypothetical device and not something that, and saying when I look at all those specs, I also say that, so I'm going to spend $1,200 on a machine that has a cramped, like sub-sized keyboard too. And you go through the list of all the things that being described by Mark Gurman, and you're saying, so not only am I not going to have ports, I can get around, I can live in a world in which I don't use those ports, but the trackpad is not going to have a click response, so it's just going to be nothing but touch. And the number of times
that's a little weird, isn't it? That's a little weird. Yeah.
This just again, I'm not reviewing a product I haven't tried. This is not even. This is just a rumor. Yeah. But this sounds like a real piece of crap.
And this is the thing where Andy and I actually are in agreement, because I think what I'm saying is I totally see this as a product Apple would make. And Andy's saying, yeah, but it doesn't sound very good, and it'll take them 2 years to get it right. And I think maybe that's all true. I think maybe that we're up for another MacBook Air that's like super aggressive. Like, we're going to be as thin and light as possible, and it's only going to have one port, and you'll like it. Yeah. And that. Because the other thing about the MacBook Air originally, although it took 2 years to get there, they weren't wrong about the decisions they made. They were too early. And I feel like this may be that again too, which is ports. Yeah. Who needs them? And the MacBook Pro has ports if you want ports.
Well, on that same basis, Windows Phone is also the right decision, and the iPhone is wrong. Just Microsoft just got there early. I mean,
the difference is the MacBook Air became successful.
At the end of the day, I'm recommending real things for people who might actually spend real money to use it. And all I'm saying is that the Hypo Mac describes a machine that I'd say, if you're super rich and $1,200 is the same as $500 to you, I am sure that this, as a really super lightweight computer for the times when the 13-inch MacBook Air is just too much of a burden. Oh my God, the 13-inch. Let my people go. 13.
It does sound like not your primary machine, but a secondary machine.
Unless you're somebody who is
but you're using
not particularly. I mean, there are going to be users for whom it's a perfectly good system. But I agree with Andy. It's going to be like that original MacBook Air. It's going to be weird, and there are going to be people who will be like, "This is just not for me."
Or you're going to get a dock.
Yeah,
and the dock will connect to that new USB-C
which may be part of the story we don't know. I do wonder if there's a whole other shoe to drop here. I wrote a piece about this on 6 Colors, and I said, I made up the specs, but I can hear somebody at Apple saying, "Oh, but we've engineered the most amazing power." Maybe it's Johnny Ive. I'm almost doing his accent. The most amazing power adapter ever. Right. It's also a dock, and or for $50 you can get which it could be. There may be more to the story, but I don't think Andy's necessarily wrong.
I'm also agreeing with you there too. That's the other thing. The other thing I talk about in this column, which is that you can't really understand a lot of art when you take it out of its context.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's not until this would make sense if this is, and here's another service we're releasing to the side of this, or here is that it's designed so that your iPhone is still maybe your primary device, but this is designed because we're putting in iOS 8 and Yosemite so many great features for making this a seamless experience.
Exactly.
We don't need to have as many features. So again,
it's the Folio reborn.
Apple tells a story, and what Mark Gurman reports, and he's usually right, he's reporting specs, he's reporting details, but Apple is going, when they release a product like this, they tell a story, and there's probably other parts of the story. There's the context. You nailed it, Andy. Absolutely.
One thing that's interesting to me is I switched to a MacBook. I was using the MacBook Air, and I switched to a MacBook Pro because when I traveled, I just didn't have enough video processing power. But it was so hard to make a choice because they'd become so close together, those two systems. And the idea behind this, and again, this is just one prototype, and Mark's very clear about this. They could go ahead with a different prototype for this device. Is that it returns to the roots of the MacBook that Steve Jobs pulled out of that envelope. They're trying to get it into a smaller envelope, but it is still much more different than the iPad, the MacBook Pro has become. And there's a great comic that Rich Stevens did for us on iMore today. It's on the front page now, where it kind of paints that traditional Apple dilemma. And I think absolutely this is going to be a product that evolves over the years. But if Apple doesn't do these sorts of products, sometimes they move the industry with them. And the price is that you're an early adopter for a few years, you're a geek for a few years, and then you get the mainstream version of the product. But it is one of those categories where they can, again, push forward. And when you have handoff and you have extensibility and you have everything that's happening, I think this product makes a lot more sense.
Is it a cop-out? Because I love your idea to have the power brick have USB ports, have the Ethernet port.
Could have a breakaway, a MagSafe breakaway.
Thunderbolt display that has all of it.
I love the idea that you just had a power brick that also, because that's how you'll connect the power brick is on the C port, right?
Or it's the additional Apple Pro power brick that's available for an additional $79.
It's a cop-out, but on the other hand, you don't carry it with you necessarily. And it could have an SD card reader in it.
And this is the difference between the language that Andy is speaking and I'm speaking, which is I'm trying to figure out, is this a product and would Apple make it? And Andy's saying like, well, if they make it, I don't think anybody should get it. And those are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, Apple can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, there's no some of the stuff they do is legitimately bonkers. I still think that the MacBook Pro is not one of the best. It's certainly the best MacBook Pro they're making in 2014, but it's not a particularly. It's a mid-range. It's a mislabeled mid-range machine. I just don't know why they are so fixated on making things smaller and thinner, as opposed to what if we make this more pleasant to use? What if we so again, my fixation tends to be on, okay, Apple, you've gotten rid of the bezel completely. You have shrunk down that keyboard so it doesn't match the other keyboards this user is going to use. What are you giving the user that is a practical thing? And if you tell me, well, you know those bags that are just too small to hold a 13-inch or an 11-inch Air? Well, there you go. Like, what? I don't know of those. Well, you're welcome, but I don't see. You're welcome, I said.
But Andy, you could put it in upside down or right side up. It could go either way. How about now? How much would you pay?
I forget who said it, but someone made a really good point. Like, I was walking around CES all week with a 13-inch MacBook Pro on my back, and it doesn't sound like much, but when you're walking for 12 hours a day, and it's the same thing when you went from the iPad to the iPad Air. It doesn't seem like a big difference, but as you hold it up more and when you're reading with it more, the difference it becomes palpable. And there are a certain class of people or a certain class of use cases, and I'm not suggesting it's netbook-like, at least at all in any way, shape, or form, but when it gets beyond a certain threshold where it will be absolutely, and again, I forget who said this earlier in the week, it'll be absolutely invisible in your bag. It'll be absolutely invisible on an airplane. It'll just feel like you have almost like an iPad with a keyboard with you where you're going, but running OS 10.
Was it Stephen Levy who accidentally recycled his MacBook Air by putting it out with the Sunday New York Times?
Somebody did, yeah.
I think it was practically invisible.
Melton almost flew it over his head the first time he picked up the prototype because he wasn't expecting it to be that light.
Yeah. Actually, this new Dell is it's 2.6 pounds compared to 2.96 pounds.
We saw it. Yes, it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And he made another point there that I think is really valuable, which is Mark Gurman, or maybe it was Rene, but you guys are both great. Mark Gurman is reporting on what they're working on. It may not be what they ship. That also
even
change.
Mark says this all the time. You know, just because this exists doesn't mean it's a product.
Lots of rumor reports that end up wrong, quote unquote, were accurate to the point when they were reported, and then things change because things change all the time. It'll be fascinating to see. I think Andy would agree with me on this point. It is fascinating to see the bonkers things that Apple does. Yeah. And this is one of those little mental exercises of, is this so bonkers that they're not going to do it?
I want it.
Or are they going to do it?
I would buy it so fast. In fact, that's why I bought the Dell, because I didn't think Apple was going to do this too soon.
Yeah. I think that once they have a really cool vision, once they have a really firm and confident vision of here's what we want to be doing in 2016, 2017, they don't lose any time in rolling out the hardware they're going to need to make that happen. Right. There's some red flag phrases that sometimes I like to argue against, and that's so. Or more like I'm gonna swallow my words because I don't want to start an argument, not with you people, but like with in other places. It's like, so I've been talking to you for 30 minutes, and remember how just 20 minutes ago you said that Android is crap because they shipped a half-baked product that didn't really work, and it took them 4 revisions to finally get it to really works, but you were defending this other Apple product that was also crap for the first 3 versions, and in that case it's because no, they're futurists, they're building the future, and everybody was catching up to them. No, they built crap that made a bad life for the people who bought it, the poor bastards who spent money for this early version of this thing that caught on fire and just insulted their hair and stuff like that. But
we'd be saying, hindsight is part of that. We'd be saying that about the MacBook Air now if they had, it turned out to be a successful product, but if it had just flopped, and that first edition would be what we would remember.
We'd be saying, oh, it's obvious. This couldn't possibly have worked. Look at all the mistakes that I would never have approved if I were the head of the company when, We're
going to take a break, come back with your picks of the week, my friends. But first, a word, snack time.
Snacks.
Snack time. How'd you know that, Andy? You could tell I was looking at snacks.
So the snacks.
You could hear the rattle of the Lone Star snack mix from naturebox.com, or Andy's favorite, and actually I have to say mine too, the Big Island pineapple rings.
I ate a whole bag this weekend.
Oh, those are so good. Jason, you're the only one in studio, so you get to choose which one we open. Now, let me just tell you. Here we go. That's 2. Coffee kettle popcorn. Kettle corn with coffee caramelized popcorn.
Yep.
Honey mustard flavored pretzel bites, honey Dijon pretzels, or sweet blueberry almonds. Now, one thing these all have in common: nutritionist approved. There are never any high fructose corn syrup. You already opened it.
Honey Dijon pretzels are open.
He just ripped it open, man. They've got. You don't want to hear the spiel. They got 0 artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners. 0 grams trans fats. You'll even find snacks with the bold flavors you crave. Like which ones?
Honey mustard Dijon pretzels. They're so good.
You clearly crave bold flavors.
That was the one that made my stomach growl.
The nice thing is I'm going to get you a box with 5 snacks in it free. All you do is pay $2 shipping. It's your complimentary trial box of NatureBox. Once you decide which snacks from the hundreds they offer that you want, sweet, savory, they have vegan snacks, they have gluten-free snacks. You get, there really is a great choice of stuff. Chocolate banana chips, Kung Pao pretzels, lemon pucker pistachios. Look at that. Jason is actually handing out, our studio audience is now receiving their very own honey Dijon pretzels.
Sorry, Rene and Andy.
Oh, gosh.
Throw some at the screen. screen.
Now, these are, by the way, resealable bags, so you don't have to eat the whole thing. Nice. I'm just a big fan. And then they're delivered to your door monthly or more if you get crazy about it. NatureBox, yum, 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 naturebox.com/twit to get your complimentary sampler box. Stay full, stay strong. Start snacking smarter. naturebox.com. I can't do the ad and eat my honey Dijon pretzels. You can, though. Jason's going to be quiet for a little bit. We thank NatureBox for their support of MacBreak Weekly, while Andy Ihnatko gives us his pick of the week.
I have an audio-related pick. I have Bluetooth headphones have been off my radar pretty much forever because I tried the first generation that came out. I thought, okay, that's kind of nice, but I don't really need them. And so when I started to get back into realizing that, it's winter and I've got a coat, I've got a scarf, and I've got like my iPad or my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, and I also maybe have a camera around my neck, and I'm just been over the past years just been beaten down to the idea of well, of course I'm just gonna have to like pull everything off of my head and then just like cut my headphones free from that tangle. But I finally found a pair of Bluetooth headphones I really, really like. They're from LG. They're called the Tone Pro. They make 2 or 3 different ones in the line. These are like medium kind of grade, and these cost about, the list price is $69. What I love about them is the design, where all the electronics and all of the batteries are in this little collar that you just wear around your neck, just like that. And you don't have to have it above your clothes; you can have it underneath your clothes. And when you just want to listen, you just pop these earbuds free. They're held in place by magnets. and you can have just one in your ear if you're just listening to something mono, or you want to listen to traffic while you walk. You can have both of them in and listen to stereo. There are also push buttons here for like answering or rejecting a call, like next track, volume, stuff like this. And when you're not using it, like these just click into the magnets, and you just don't even notice that you're wearing these. When I got these last week, the week before, the second day, like I didn't realize that I had been wearing them for 13 hours until at the end of the day I was getting ready for bed, and I pulled off my sweater, and this thing just sort of clacked onto the floor because it was just so light. I didn't even notice that I was getting them. They sound very, very good. These are $70 headphones, list price. They probably, because they're Bluetooth and because they're earbuds, they sound about as good as maybe $30 or $40 wired headphones, but that's nothing compared to how well these things work. Yeah. The battery will last I'm getting a good 8 or 9 hours per charge, and it recharges in about an hour or two. And they've really made me into a convert. And the other thing I should mention is that, I'm wearing a ball cap now, but I often wear like a hat with a brim, and I can't wear like over the head headphones while I'm walking because it doesn't fit under the hat. And I can't also, there's also the other popular design is the kind where there's like a band that goes like across the back of your skull into the front. And because I got like a big melon, like it's perfectly comfortable so long as I like walk like this. But as soon as I lift my head up, it's like it's like cuts into my
these
ears.
Are great. These would be good for working out too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just love them. Now I have to give a couple of warnings though. There is an absolutely perfect Chinese knockoff of these headphones. And there are a lot of counterfeits on Amazon. As a matter of fact, I first discovered this style by buying a $15 pair of like knockoffs. It wasn't even like labeled as LG or anything like that. I wasn't even aware that LG had made these. I just thought that, somebody like imported a bunch of these and like it'll come in a Ziploc baggie. When I recommended them elsewhere, and someone's, hey, so those are just knockoffs of the LG tones. So, they are. Oh goodness, I really want to buy like the legitimate ones because they're going to sound a lot better, and they absolutely did. But it was so confusing because there were like a bunch of sellers working through Amazon that they have like a rip-off of the packaging, they have a rip-off of everything else, and so you get these. It explains why the reviews of these headphones are like so across the board. Like there'll be like a 4 or 5 star reviews. Oh wow, the sound is really great. It's like there's a lot of bass, there's a lot of treble. The battery lasts a long time. But then like 1 star, it just sounds like I'm underwater with these things. The battery lasted 2 hours and it refused to pair. So I actually wound up, because it was so hard to find a seller that was definitely going to be selling me the legitimate ones. For God's sakes, I got into the car. I drove to, for God's sakes, a Best Buy. I went to a brick and mortar store.
Unbelievable.
I paid full retail. I paid sales tax, Leo. I paid sales tax.
Like an animal.
That's how far I went. Exactly. So, but I wound up getting what was absolutely, full on, complete with the hologram embossed on the box and everything like that. And I couldn't be happier with these.
And they're very lightweight, I gotta say. Very nice.
Exactly. It's like, again, I was just testing these out, or the original like $15 knockoff pair I bought, and it's like, again, I just, okay, that sounds good. I just pulled the things out of my ears and just went on my way. And it really, truly was not until like 10 hours later that I've been wearing these all day long. Okay. That's a vote in favor. And they do, like, they stay on, like they're nicely contoured, so it's not like I don't feel like I'm in danger of these just like falling off and just dropping them on the sidewalk. So
nice.
Yep.
The LG Tone Pro Bluetooth stereo headset. So we should mention before the show, we realized there was a little conflict.
Yes.
A little conflict.
We worked it out.
But you guys have clearly worked it out. So, Jason, you got custody of the pick.
Andy wanted to pick this too, although I'm glad he got his own pick. I had nothing else if I didn't pick this.
Shall I say that I was the person who claimed it first on the show notes.
This is true.
So by divine
eminent
providence,
domain,
playground rules.
Playground rules.
But clearly, Jason had a lot more experience and expertise about this, and so I willfully ceded.
Yes,
Jason Snell
you
was rightfully
you stepped
mine.
aside. I appreciate it.
Your pick of the week.
Audio Hijack 3 from Rogue Amoeba. The last time Audio Hijack was really updated was about 10 years ago. It's an audio utility for the Mac.
But I've used it for years.
It is the audio utility for the Mac. And it looks completely different from ever before. Krista Mergun did a complete redesign of it, and it's gorgeous. It is all laid out through flowcharts. Anything you can think of, basically, involving your Mac's audio, you can do with Audio Hijack 3. It is the solution to numerous podcasting problems that I've had over the years in terms of I want to record this from over here. I want to simplify a recording of a multi-track scenario. At my old office, we had a multi-track recorder, and I wanted to provide just everybody in the office with the ability to record a podcast by pressing a button. Couldn't do it. Everything had to go through a multi-track recorder. Audio Hijack does it. You can record multiple things. You can mix things. You can send things to different outputs from different inputs. And it's all easy to use because you just drop down these little blocks and say, here's an application, and then record it at this format, and then send it to this speaker.
This is a significant improvement in the UI. It was always very hard to figure out.
It was a weird grid, and it was
easier.
powerful. It's got more features now, more power, and it's easier to use.
Yeah,
you can figure it out just by looking, and it comes with a whole bunch of filters, and it supports audio units so that if you've got other plugins, you can use those. And when you play, it's got this amazing animation. When you play, you can actually see the little links in the flowchart light up as it's recording,
and
it's
nice.
a real
so you know
it's a real VU. When it makes noise, it actually flickers, so you know what you're getting as you're recording, and it solves
no more mystery.
Pretty much every. I think maybe there's like one obscure thing that I need another utility for, but essentially this solves all of my needs. So whether you're somebody who just wants to record something you found on the internet, or you're somebody who is doing podcasting or some other audio or video production, and you need to control what happens on your Mac, because the OS X based system does not do a very good job of routing audio around. You can sort of set an input and an output, and some apps will let you set a custom input or output. This will let you do sort of anything you can think of just by laying down these blocks. So great interface and great power.
Is this how does this compare to Audacity? It's completely different.
Yeah, this is not an editor.
This works with Audacity.
Yeah, this is a recorder. So in the end, it'll route sound. So if you want that microphone to be routed to those headphones, but that app to be routed to those speakers, and record them together and separately for editing later, you can do that. You just press the button and go.
A lot of
pretty
people
amazing.
Who use Skype, for instance, can't record both ends of a Skype conversation natively.
Right.
So you use Audio Hijack Pro, and you can mix your voice and your Skype caller's voice together to your recorder.
Right. In fact, you could set it up so that you've got. This is one of the things I actually have it set up to do. Is it's recording Skype, it's recording my voice, and it's recording an app that I run that plays sound effects, and it's also routing the sound effect app through with my voice to Skype so that I can. So they can hear the sound effects I'm playing, and I can hear them. And believe it or not, without a lot of extra software, that was pretty much impossible to do.
Now, I've used Soundflower, which is kind of a lower level thing. And in fact, I even think I use Soundflower with the old version.
And that's the one piece of that Audio Hijack doesn't really do right now is that sort of virtual input.
Does Soundflower still work with Core Audio?
It does, and there's also a great utility called Sound Siphon that does basically the same thing and has a nicer interface, but you have to pay for that one. And Soundflower still sort of works, but the interface is terrible. But this does pretty much anything else you can think of in terms of recording things on your Mac, or even not recording things, just things like taking audio from iTunes and processing it to make it have, be more compressed or be more bassy or anything like that. You can set that up too and press the button. You can send iTunes to one set of speakers and some other app, your web browser to a different set of speakers, and it'll do that too.
That's kind of cool.
It's amazing the different features.
And it does do recording. It does FLAC or AAC recording.
Yeah, you've got granular levels of detail of what you want to record, where those files get saved and what format they're in, and then you can throw in an EQ. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's pretty amazing. And
they're
easy
a great
to use.
company. I like them. There is a free trial. Go ahead.
All I would have added is that I love the fact that you can essentially build a machine for recording the thing that you record a lot, and that's the one time you have to build it, and then you're done. It's just click one button, and then this complicated thing that would have been several steps or really complicated is just click, done.
Each of these flowcharts is its own document in the documents window, or they call it like a settings window or a sessions window. And so once you make it, it's there, and then you just open it again and press record, and then you can actually go to the recordings tab and see all of the recordings you made using that preset. So it's very easy to get access to it.
Nice.
It's just a great
Not
utility.
for everybody, but if you're watching this and going, I need that, that's for you. $49.
$49, and if you've ever bought anything called Audio Hijack, any of the previous versions, it's $25.
Oh, that's a good deal. That's actually a great deal. Thank you, Jason Snell. Rene, Ritchie, your pick of the week. I'm
going to echo Jason and Andy. Just at first, I was in the Mobile Nation's chat room this morning, and everyone was going, bot. So it's something that a lot of us depend on all the time for everything.
Very timely. Just came out today.
I was at CES and I saw Serenity Caldwell using this widget on her notification center called Clips. And I was immediately very happy with it because all it does is take the clipboard from your iPhone and add it to the widget space in Notification Center. And if you start copying more things, it adds more lines. So often with the iPhone, you copy something and you want to use it, but then you go copy something else, you forget about it, you can't go back, you've got to go find it again. This just lets you have a history of the stuff that you've copied. And for many, many activities that it makes it so much easier to get actual work done on iOS devices, especially on an iPhone when you're mobile, when you're moving around show floors, things like that. So the app is called Clips. The app actually does do this kind of stuff, but having things in Notification Center means that no matter what app I'm in, I'm only ever one swipe away from having access to that data. I don't have to go looking around for it, hunting for the icon, opening the app, doing a bunch of stuff. I'm in the app I want to use. I pull it down. I get the clipboard that I want. I close it. I paste it down, and I'm back to work. And that kind of convenience and time saving is just super invaluable to me.
I just wanted to make a note that I think everybody watching this show probably knows about LastPass. Many of you already probably use LastPass, but Joseph Segrest, who created LastPass, has, for the first time ever, put it in the Mac App Store, which I think will make it a lot more accessible for a lot of less sophisticated users. LastPass is, as far as I'm concerned, the password manager. It works across all devices, including mobile. It has all the features you want. It trusts no one encryption, which means no one can see your passwords. Not even LastPass, just you. You remember one password, and it gives you fill-ins and logins for every website, many apps. It's a really great application. And now that it's available in the App Store, you can tell your less sophisticated friends just to get it, and they'll know. Oh, I see it in the App Store there. Free to use. There is a premium version which adds unlimited mobile access and family folders, which is very nice. Additional multi-factor authentication options. It's cheap. It's $1 a month, $12 a year for the full features. We actually use LastPass Enterprise at TWiT for all of our very, very super secret, super secure logins for things like servers and stuff, and it's just great. Well, that concludes this episode of MacBreak Weekly. I want to thank Andy Ihnatko for joining us from the Chicago Sun-Times. He's got a kind of interesting picture. It looks like Nighthawks at the IBM diner on your monitor behind you.
Back in the late 50s, early 60s, little kids on Christmas time would just press their noses against the IBM data server window and just dream that Santa Claus would bring them an accumulator or tape drive just on Christmas morning.
And all I got was this lousy patent. Thank you, Andy. Rene, Ritchie from imore.com. The snow is coming down. The lakes are frozen. It's hockey night in Canada.
Hockey night on the streets.
Street hockey night. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. imore.com. And, of course, their great debug podcast, which is also there. And Serenity Caldwell's also there. Curse you.
Peter Cohen.
Peter Cohen. You got the best people. It's really great. Awesome. You probably remember Jason Snell when he was editor-in-chief at Macworld.
Remember me?
Remember him? He's doing his own thing, sixcolors.com, and loving it. And he's also got a fairly active podcast network.
Yeah, visit theincomparable.com to listen to me geek out about
Love The Incomparable, which Serenity is also on.
Yeah, she's on there.
Yep.
She gets around.
Yep. She says the new season's about to begin.
Yeah, we're working on our radio theater where we're going to do.
Oh man, I'm so jealous.
Radio plays.
Where do you get your scripts?
We have a guy, David Lohr, who's one of our panelists, is a playwright, and he lives in Indiana, and he writes not only plays, but he writes radio drama for us.
I'd like to extend an invitation. I want to do this too. Maybe we can do it together, but I want to get somebody who's like, I want to get a David Chase, the guy to The Sopranos, who has a show that he could just never get anybody to make, who wants to workshop it. We wouldn't reserve rights. It would maybe just be something that you could then give the networks and say, see how great this is going to be? Remember, Francis Ford Coppola does this with all his movies. He does an audio previs. They do, I presume they do, cartoons or something. But he'll record the entire script in audio as a play, radio play first. And it's a great way to previs. So, David, call me. I don't know what the gesture I should be using is. Skype me, man. All right.
Have your Cortana called my Siri?
There you go. You got Cortana in my Siri. You got your Siri in my Cortana. Two great flavors. We are done here. I want to thank everybody who came in the studio live, and you got your own pretzels.
Front row got pretzels.
Front row got pretzels.
Lucky studio audience.
If you want to be a studio audience for any show, we do have an open studio. I'm proud of that. I love it, too, because I like having an audience. And you can arrange to be here just by emailing tickets at twit.tv. It doesn't cost anything. Frankly, you can just show up. But this way, we'll make sure we have room for you and so forth. If 1,000 people all decided to show up on the same day, we would have to turn some away. We wouldn't want to do that. You can also, of course, watch live. We stream it at live.twit.tv. MacBreak Weekly happens to be every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1900 UTC. So if you want to watch live, please do. Our chat room is a great way to participate. If you don't, well, we got on-demand audio and video of all of our shows after the fact at twit.tv. For this show, it's twit.tv/MBW for MacBreak Weekly. But we also, it's on iTunes. It's everywhere you can get podcasts. And, of course, Overcast. And, of course, the great apps. I mentioned Dmitry Lialin's Windows Phone app, but there's apps on iOS, Android, even the Roku. So just search for Twit. And then subscribe to MacBreak Weekly. Thanks for joining us. Now, get back to work, because break time is over.